Okay, so this is attempt 2 at lesson 5 because there was a thing I realized I'd forgotten to add to our database here before we can test it, and that is a start block sensor. And a start block sensor is just our term for a sensor that's not really on the road, not really meant to be intersected with anything, but contains the code that you want to execute to kind of set your ambient traffic and density and other kind of environmental variables that you want. So we're going to drag that and into our start point sensors group here. And we're going to call it start block. And we don't need to resize it or anything. As a matter of fact, we don't even have to embed it because we're going to put it off the road so that nothing intersects it. It's basically just something to hold code for us. And if I go to my documents here and go just pick let's go into, we're going to go find another start block sensor JavaScript file in another project. So start block, we're going to copy this one and we're going to put it in our scripts folder. As a matter of fact, we don't even have to change it because there's only one piece of code that we need, and that is to set our ambient traffic density. So what happened in the last version of this video that I just deleted was that when I started my test run, I had really high traffic density all around me, and we really actually don't want that. Many of our databases, um, uh, the default is maximum traffic, randomly generated traffic. So you can have the simulator either randomly generate traffic for you, or you could place your traffic like using paths and sensors like we did to set up that scenario. The trouble with randomly, on the surface, you might think that having randomly generated ambient traffic would be very convenient, but actually it's not. The random traffic has a really bad habit of messing up the timing of your simulator scenarios, your experimental scenarios, and they just kind of get in the way. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll put in the traffic for our sensors or our scenarios, and then we'll put in other traffic like movie extras that are just there to be there, but they're actually scripted just like scenario vehicles, but they're there to kind of add some more volume, I guess, to the population of the database, so that your participants can't zero in, just look where the cars are and kind of figure out where your scenarios are. So the way you turn off or turn on your traffic density is with this command, and the traffic density of 0 is no random traffic. Traffic density of 1 is maximum traffic density. But you can't actually put in 0. I think you get some kind of weird divide by 0 error somewhere. So if you want to turn off it, you just set it to some really small number. So we use 0.001 for that, and that in effect turns off traffic. And so we typically attach that to just a sensor that's kind of shoved into the database at the beginning, off the roadway, and if you can under user script attach start block. So we actually didn't even need to modify that code that we used. So now we're going to save this and publish it again. I think when I think I'll pause it here. Did that work okay for the other ones? Okay. So all right, so we paused the video while the database was publishing because we didn't want you to have to sit there and listen to silence while we were twiddling our thumbs. So this is now published. We've got our start block, and again, I'll just a programming note from one of the questions I just fielded. The reason why you want to keep a list of the vehicles you used is that you can't, if I had made it clear, you cannot have multiple instances of a vehicle in the database at the same time. So you cannot have two vehicle 28s driving around simultaneously. And so our library has 39 vehicles or 40 vehicles in it, because it goes from 0 to 39. So if you need more than 40 vehicles, what you can do is actually move a vehicle after you've used it once for one scenario and your participant can't see that vehicle anymore. You can use the move command and move it to another path somewhere else in the database. So you can actually reuse vehicles, but you can't have multiple instances of that vehicle in the database simultaneously. But anyway, so I digress. So now we've published this. Let's test it. So to test it, we've published it. Let's go ahead and close ISA and open up SimCreator. And SimCreator is the program that actually runs the simulation. It contains the physics model. It's basically contains a mathematical model for the simulator. And the login name and the password are actually the same, so you can copy and paste the word administrator into the password. Then open up. Typically, it's under most recent documents. It's at the top. You want to open up SMAC Sim Civilian, or SMAC Sim Civilian as we call it. And this is testing our test bed. And if you want to run the simulation where you can drive it sitting here at the development computer, you want to run this one. This is on the center channel. It's only one screen versus 3 for the main simulator. Where you save your published file depends on where you want to run it. If you want to run it here at the simulation or the development computer, you save it as TileWorld under the TileWorld directory. Or if you want to run it on the main simulator, then you publish it under your project folder in the TileWorld directory, so one level down. And we'll cover that later. So, but for now, we're just testing. So this particular model, this mathematical model you see here, contains all the physics. It contains the visual dynamics and the physical dynamics. Basically, all the characters. It handles everything. The visual rendering. These models have to be pointed at a file, the database to run. And just so happens SMAC Sim Civilian is set up to be permanently pointed at tileworld.wrl. So you don't actually have to tell it what database to run. It's because it's already pointed at tileworld.wrl. So all you have to do is open it and run it if you've published your test model to tileworld. So if we hit execute, you can change the run length, but most of these you just want to leave alone. 2,000 seconds is usually sufficient to test your database. So it'll go. And so to drive, there are things that you want to keep in mind. So imagine the screen bisected by two invisible lines. So the horizontal halfway point is the delineation mark point between brake and accelerator. So if your cursor is below the halfway point, that's braking. If it's above, that's accelerator. Also, there's a vertical halfway point. So if you're to the right, on the right hand side of the screen, that's like turning to the right. If you're on the left hand side of the screen, it's like turning to the left. So here, if you can see my cursor, you go above the halfway point, we begin to accelerate. If you go down below the halfway point, we brake. Just also, if you go over here to the left, you're turning to the left. You go to the right, you're turning to the right. So, and it takes a little getting used to, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually quite easy to drive like this. And hopefully you can hear me over the sound effects from the simulator. So there's our construction zone. So we should be driving through the sensor for their oncoming vehicle. And we're going to ignore that yellow light. So let's so there's our oncoming vehicle. And now we should be coming through our conflict vehicle. Yeah. And that's very loud in my ears. Hopefully that it's not too loud on your video. But so our timing actually worked out pretty well on that. So we can continue driving just for the fun of it. And you can see as we drive, the physics model, and I'll try to speak loudly so you can hear me over the sound effects, is actually quite accurate. If you take a turn too fast, you see one of our cars is already coming around. You'll slide off the road. See, and you can actually slide and skid just like a normal car. So it looks like our green, whatever it was, our green. No, that's the being. That must be the Passat. Is making the rounds on our figure eight because we told it to turn left. So it's just going to go around. If we wait here, it'll come back around again, but we won't do that. So anyway, that's how you test your database. And to end the simulation, you hit escape. And you'll get this error. You can ignore it. It's basically just complaining that we didn't let the model run for 2,000 seconds. That's normal. So that's it for testing. You don't have to do anything other than just close Sim Creator when you're done. Then if you want to make any changes to your database, let's say you got an error and you're in here and we're back to our lesson3.wrl. So changes to the database. Because the JavaScript is external to the database itself, if the changes you make are within just the JavaScript, for instance, if you wanted to change the desired speed or the desired turn of a vehicle, you don't have to republish because that's outside of this information and it doesn't require a physical change to the database. However, let's say you want that even though the timing was actually pretty good the way we had it set up, let's say we wanted that to delay the emergence of this conflict vehicle to a little bit later. What we would do is change the position of our sensor. We would just move it down a little bit. But so now that we've physically changed its location, we would have to resave it and republish it in order to do that. And of course, if you add paths or add geometry or change the location of anything, you've got to republish it because you're making a physical change to the database. One mistake that a lot of people make is when they and I've done this a few times and it always causes headaches, and you always kick yourself after you realize what you've done. When you publish again, always make sure you remember and you just want to test it, that you always type in Tile World, because sometimes people will just say publish and hit OK, and then they'll hit Tile World or they'll hit go and run it creator, and they'll wonder why the change they just made didn't happen. Well, it's because it's pointed at the old, the version previous to yours. So make sure if you're testing, that you always just type in Tile World right there, because it'll save yourself a lot of head scratching as to why your database or your car is not doing what you wanted it to do or intended it to do. So this lesson was actually very short. I'll end it here. We will not save our changes, and we'll meet you at the next lesson, which would be lesson 6.